In a rare moment of democratic history in South Africa, President Sir Ramaphosa appeared in the Pretoria High Court to formally account for why he sanctioned and endorsed the arrest of Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, Commander Julius Malema. The courtroom was filled to capacity with legal observers, members of the media, opposition leaders, representatives from civil society, and high-ranking African National Congress, ANC, personalities. The nation held its breath as the president delivered a firm yet solemn justification for a decision that has plunged the country into political uncertainty and unrest. This historic occurrence represents the first time since the dawn of South Africa's democracy that a sitting president has been forced publicly to justify in open court the arrest of a prominent opposition leader. The stakes are high, not only for Ramaphosa's own legacy and that of his government, but also for the integrity of South Africa's constitutional order and the balance of power within its democratic institutions. "I did not come to this decision lightly," Ramaphosa started, his tone calm but weighed down by the seriousness of the moment. "The arrest of any citizen must always be justified. But the arrest of a sitting member of parliament and the leader of a major political party must be to the highest legal and constitutional standards. I am here today to assure this court and the people of South Africa that those standards were not just met, they were exceeded." Ramaphosa went on to detail the process that resulted in the controversial move during a period of several months. He claimed the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee, the State Security Agency, SSA, and the South African Police Service, SAPS, had prepared and presented several classified intelligence reports. These reports, in Ramaphosa's account, indicated Julius Malema and other top EFF leaders as being centrally involved in heightening threats toward national stability. Among the charges were inciting violence by holding unregulated and inflammatory public assemblies, massive posting of inflammatory social media material, willful efforts to erode the legitimacy of the judiciary and law enforcement agencies, secret gatherings with foreign organizations accused of funding domestic upheaval, and conspiracies to hold illegal occupations of government buildings. What had started as passionate political rhetoric, Ramaphosa stated, had become a systematic attempt to undermine and destabilize the constitutional order. He emphasized that while South Africa's democracy safeguards the right to protest, that right cannot be turned into a force to undermine the stability of the state. In his affidavit sworn before the court, Ramaphosa said, "When a democratically elected leader starts mobilizing structures outside parliament, outside the law, when they authorize violence under the cover of revolution, when they promise to smash the judiciary and substitute it with vigilante justice, then it ceases to be politics. It becomes sedition. And sedition is not tolerable in a democratic society governed by the rule of law." Although stern in tone, the president went out of his way to commend Malema for his contribution to the democratic process. He reaffirmed the EFF leader's constitutional freedom of speech and right of opposition, noting further that assertive political debate is a pillar of South Africa's hard-fought liberty. But he criticized Malema for blurring the line between activism and anarchy, for surrendering democratic conventions to the use of methods that would create fear and mayhem. Opponents of the arrest have not been silent. Numerous critics have questioned the timing of the arrest, which was carried out at the crack of dawn. The raid has been likened to methods used by totalitarian governments to muzzle opposition through intimidation and surprise. Ramaphosa vigorously responded to those charges. "I see the sensitivities. I see the ghosts of our past. But I repudiate the notion that this was a politically driven arrest. The National Prosecuting Authority applied for the warrant. The judiciary approved. I simply did my duty as the constitutional head of state in accordance with the law and in the defense of the Republic." The president also emphasized that the action was not taken unilaterally. The Justice Ministry, the Office of the Chief Justice, the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee, and the Hawks, the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, were all involved in the deliberations before the arrest was made. "There was no unilateral action," Ramaphosa stated. "The process was lawful, consultative, and driven by national security interests. At the same time, the mood on the streets outside the courtroom was one of pandemonium and anger. Thousands of EFF supporters wearing their signature red berets marched through the streets of Pretoria, calling out, "Free Malema now," and brandishing placards with slogans like, "Ramaphosa must fall" and "Democracy under attack." Some protesters fought with police when barricades were erected to manage the crowds. Civil rights organizations observing the protests cautioned that increased provocation could result in wholesale unrest. The crisis has already elicited demonstrations in urban areas such as Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, and Polokwane. In certain cases, transport services were disrupted, businesses were closed, and isolated cases of vandalism and looting were witnessed. There is increasing worry among security analysts that unless tensions are relieved, the situation may escalate into a national crisis. Within the courtroom, Malema's attorneys mounted a strong defense. They submitted a counter-motion for the warrant of arrest to be dismissed with immediate effect and asked for Malema's release. The warrant is not only unconstitutional but also constitutes a blatant abuse of power by the executive, said Advocate Dolemu, who heads the defense. The president is employing the police and the courts to battle political wars. It is not about the law. It is not about national security. It is a deliberate attempt to disarm the most vocal voice demanding land justice and radical economic change. If this becomes the precedent, it will signal the end of opposition politics in South Africa. The defense argued that Malema's rhetoric, though inflammatory, is within the scope of political speech. They charged that Ramaphosa and his supporters contrived to misread dissent as sedition and to criminalize opposition. The team also challenged the integrity of the intelligence reports, most of which are classified and cannot be cross-examined. As the theater of the courtroom unfolds, political commentators remain polarized. Some see the arrest as a measure necessary to maintain order and safeguard democratic institutions against rebel challenges. Others regard it as a risky ploy that could undermine South Africa's democracy and create a precedent for stifling genuine opposition. The wider public is also divided. While some citizens have welcomed Ramaphosa for showing leadership and cracking down on what they see as political extremism, others feel the arrest is a diversion from the government's own shortcomings, specifically, its failure to manage unemployment, inequality, and corruption within the ruling party. While the lawsuit remains far from over and tensions between the nation's regions are at a boiling point, South Africa stands at a crossroads.